Hi Roots, my name is Emily. I'm on the teaching team. I'm not in a tent right now. This is my attic office in a new house I moved to. So, yeah, great space. Come visit me sometime. COVID, safe, friendly. So we're in a teaching series called It Is Good. We are looking at what it means to be Jesus followers in relation to the environment, in relation to God's earth that he made and called good. We're talking about creation care, which in my mind raises the question, does the church give a care about creation? And in the Western evangelical church, of which tradition I have come from, I think the answer is no. So I want to look today at how we got there and how we can change so that we do give a care about creation. So I'm going to look at the beginning in Genesis, I'm going to go to the end in Revelation and see how we got to where we are today and how we can get where we want to go. So let's look at Genesis chapter 1, the very beginning. So after God created everything in the earth, he said, "Let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So that's exactly what God did. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it." Now, last week, Oshida talked about how that word, it can be translated to keep it, and that is a word, loving care, and it is the same word in our blessing song that we sing from Numbers, "May the Lord bless you and keep you." So some translations talk about cultivate, watch over, tend, keep, look after. Those are the kind of things that God set man in the garden to do. How we doing on that? Not super great. And I was looking at this passage in Genesis, and I was thinking about those you had one job memes, where someone is given some kind of task, and just a pretty simple task, and they completely blow it. So the guy who writes SOTP on the ground for the stop sign, so it reads SOTP, and the t-shirt maker that has like Asia and then the pictures of the continent of Africa, or the package of corn on the cob that's labeled watermelon. You had one job people, one job. And in some ways, reading Genesis 1, I was like, wow, we had one job, care for the earth, and not doing so hot. In fact, out of all religious groups today, evangelicals are the least likely to be involved in environmental activism. So how did that happen? How did we get from caretakers to not giving a care? There's a number of reasons. Media, politics is, we are so messed up in our marriage to politics, and to politicians who tell us that the earth doesn't matter, that the environmentalism doesn't matter, that we leave that to the hippie tree huggers. And that is really, really, really messed up things. But I'm not going to go into that a ton. I want to focus on eschatology and how that impacts our view of ecology. So eschatology is the part of theology that looks at the end of the world, what happens after we die, the afterlife. Ecology is the section of biology that looks at the relationship between organisms and then the relationship between organisms and their environment. And what I want to propose to you is that our view of eschatology shapes how we interact with ecology, with the way that the world works. Because what you believe about the future impacts what you do here in the present. What I think is going to happen shapes how I behave in the right now. And so the way that we look at where we're going affects where we are right now. So a really predominant view that came and shaped the way that Christians think about the environment appeared in the States around like the 1850s, so 170 years ago. And it was something called dispensationalism, which I don't really understand a lot of. Ask TC, he's the nerdy one. And one of the big pieces of it, though, that I do understand is the idea of the rapture, which used to scare me a lot when I was a kid. And the idea of the rapture is kind of like when you go to the drive-through at the banks, like the drive-through ATMs or the drive-through teller, and they have those tubes that go up, the pneumatic tubes. They're the ones that make this like sucking, whooshing sound, like, and they suck your check up in there. The rapture is like the people who believe and follow God get like sucked up, and then everybody else is left behind, and the earth is destroyed before we live in heaven or end up in heaven. So if that's your view of what the gospel is that the gospel is just our souls being brought back to God, then the earth doesn't really have any place in that equation, because the earth is not going to make it. The earth is going to be gone. And if that's what you're thinking, then why would you put any energy or investment into the earth, right? It's like the old cliche about rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The Titanic's going down, stop rearranging the deck chairs, get some lifeboats. The earth is going down, stop worrying about creation, go rescue souls. And our souls being in right relationship with God is really important. It's one of the things Jesus came for, is to reconcile us to God. He's the reconciler who restores and puts us in right relationship with God. And so that's true. But it's this much of the gospel that is being focused on. And there's 4 components to the gospel: the right relationship with God, right relationship within ourselves, the brokenness there, healing in the relationship with others, and then right relationship with creation and what God has made. And it's that 4th component that gets left out if our view of the future is that doesn't ultimately matter. So what's a different way? How can our eschatology, a different form of eschatology, shape how we think about ecology? And I think that the view of eschatology that Jesus offers us is one where his return and the end of the world and afterlife is a restoration of his kingdom. When Jesus teaches us to pray, he says to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We as followers of Jesus are part of the bringing of God's kingdom here and now. We are moving. The future is a movement towards the restoration of the goodness, it is good, of all things, including creation. And we're invited to be part of that. So when we look at the end, when we look at afterlife, we realize that our actions here have not just an echo, they have a direct impact on the way that the earth is going to be made new, the restoration process. So believing that the world is going to burn is a destruction. And believing that the kingdom comes now and continues and we're part of that is like a renovation. It's a reconstruction. And in that first view, that rapture view, there's a big emphasis on it's all about people. Like, that is the number one thing, people's souls. And there is some room in there for like, well, we should take care of people in poverty and their medical needs and stuff. But primarily it's about souls. And people are really important to take care of, which is why it's important for us to recognize that our relationship with the environment has a direct impact on people. You know, the consequences of sin are built into the sin. So when I am out of right relationship with creation, what rebounds back on me is stuff I brought on myself because of my poor treatment. So when we don't take care of the earth, right now we're experiencing climate change, which is wreaking havoc in the poorest places in the world. The richest countries, us, are creating the most trouble, but we are experiencing the least effects. It is other countries that are experiencing drought and flooding, big natural disasters. Or in our country, like the poorest people in our country, manufacturing plants that are spilling chemicals into the ground are built in neighborhoods primarily where people of color live. So of course, racism is built into this. When we treat creation out of a place of greed, selfishness, consumerism, individualism, exploitativeness, all of that, we cause harm and we hurt people. But most of us, I know for me, are really, really removed from recognizing that impact. We're not even super aware of how we're connected to that. When I was growing up in Kenya, I was a lot more aware of that because in Kenya we had the long rains and the short rains. And those rains started getting really screwed up. And there were many instances of drought when I lived in Kenya. And I was still a step removed because my family had resources, but I saw the way that it was impacting the country, and especially my friends who were farmers who were trying to grow crops. And it was devastating. And so when it rained, at the end of a drought, when the rains finally started coming, we would run outside and we would sing and we would dance and we would thank God. And it was like this big celebration for the breaking of the drought. And I have never once done that here in the States, ever. I do not sing and rejoice when it rains because I don't see the impact. And so what we don't always realize is that not caring for creation is hurting others. And like Oshita was talking about last week, it's hurting ourselves. The earth cares for us, and there is renewal and care that it's a gift God gives us to take care of us. But I have this question I'm thinking about, that if my only reason to engage with creation is, oh, well, if I'm doing a poor job with it, then other human beings are suffering. That's great. But what if that means that I'm missing out on this joy that God offers us in being stewards and caretakers of his creation? So the Psalms writers, they often just have all these joyous things to say about creation. They talk about the stars and the oceans and the plants and the animals, and it's really beautiful. And I was reading some of those, and then I thought, oh, I want to read something that God has to say about how he feels about his creation. And I flipped open to Job. Job. The end of Job has had a very long monologue to God, and God responds to him in 4 chapters. And you know what he talks about? He talks about creation, and it's amazing. I'm just going to read a few excerpts. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? God asked Job. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? Who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Were you there when I said, this far you may come and no further? Here is where you proud waves halt. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? What is the way to the abode of light, and where does darkness reside? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and feathers of the stork. Do you give the horse its strength, or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom? Does the eagle soar at your command? And on, and God is going on. He's describing these works that he has made, and there's a pride and a joy in his creation. And you know what? God is the creator, and we humans are part of the creation. We are interconnected and intertwined with this creation. So this plant here, this watch chain plant, we are both created things. And yes, I am made in God's image. I have a unique responsibility to care for this plant. This plant's job is to bring glory to God just by being a beautiful plant. Like, that's its job. My job is to take care of this plant. But we are interconnected in that, as you know, this plant gives me oxygen, and I taken from my carbon dioxide. We are woven into this creation that God celebrates and has joy in. Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and God delights in that creation. And when we are so, sometimes we function like this. We function like, oh, I'm a human over here, and I have like my human sphere, and then there's like the earth sphere over here, but I just like join in with the earth when I want to, kind of thing. And we don't realize that we are so part of what God made, and our human centricity hurts. It has damaging effects. And don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that a tulip is on the same level as a human. God says about the birds, are you not worth much more than they? But he also says he takes care of the birds. And so we are so interconnected with all of this stuff that's going on Earth. We can't separate ourselves. My clothing is connected to the Earth. What I eat is connected to the Earth. The stuff I buy is connected to the Earth. Whether I walk or drive is connected to the Earth. We are all intertwined. And so to live with the end view that the earth doesn't matter is to be in denial of the way that God has connected us and put us in this special place alongside the rest of creation. Creation, creator, caretakers of creation together. But the view of the end of the world being God restoring the kingdom and making things new is a different view. It's acknowledging, it's accepting this interconnectedness that we have, this entanglement with all of creation. So if God loves this earth, then we get to love this earth too, and there's a joy in it and a worshipfulness. Taking care of creation is what we're designed to do, and it's part of how we worship. We're stewards, right? So Jesus talks about he has parables about the master who's going away, and when he comes back, he asks the servants, like, what did you do while I was gone? And if the servants are good servants and faithful servants, they take care of what he left behind, or they trash the place. So, are we gonna trash the place, or are we gonna take care of it? The gospel calls us to take care of it. So I said I would also include Revelation, Genesis to Revelation. So I just want to read this right at the end here. Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. That's verse 1. Skip down to verse 5. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. Eugene Boehringer, he has this thing I really like. He says, God is not making all new things. God is making all things new. So God he's not making all new things, all brand new, spanking new things. He's making these things that he called good, which are broken. He's making these things new. And he's inviting us into that process. That's where we're headed. Our eschatology, we're headed to this participation. We're already part of this participation of God's good work, and we are part of it. So that's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay, so practically, this is a lot to think about, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that there are really giant systems, which we're not really good at thinking about systems, are we? But there's a lot going on that's way bigger than us that has to be tackled. But we also, as individuals, can take steps. Some of the steps we can take are easier to do from a privileged position. So I want to acknowledge that it's some of the things that are good action steps are harder to do if you don't have a lot of money. It's easier to buy stuff without plastic that is more expensive if you have more money. But don't let that discourage you. This isn't guilt trippy, but just some things to think about. I will put some resources on the Facebook page so that you don't have to listen to me read a bunch of book titles. But there's plastic is a huge thing to think about. There's some great books on deplasticifying your life that I've been following, and I've had some adventures this year of trying to figure out ways to get rid of more and more plastic in my life. Making my own toothpaste, which is fun. You should try it. I'll give you some tips, or if you've done it, I'd like tips. Buying clothing secondhand, that's a huge one. Not being part of fast fashion, that's a really big deal. We know the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle. We focus a lot on the recycling bit. The reducing and the reusing is huge. Thinking about where our food comes from, what's the process that our food is going through. And again, some of the food that is made in ways that are better for the earth is more expensive. And so that's again where we have to address the systems. But if you have the capacity to source your food in a different way, that's really great. Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who is just a fantastic resource, she says that the most important thing you can do for climate change is to talk to other people about climate change. So she has some great resources on how to have these conversations and how to make changes. And so I'm going to put some practical stuff on our Facebook page. But I want to invite you to remember that, like the title of this series, it is good. It's just good for us to be engaged in caring for the earth. It's not a hardship or a burden. It is joy and playful, and it's something that we get to do alongside God, alongside the God who comes to walk in a garden with us and who makes the new earth into a restored garden that was meant to be. So, yeah, It is good. It is very good. And let's do this together.